Okay, learning objective 7.2, distinguish a capital expenditure from an immediate expense. Now, just to review, the capital expenditure, the capital cost, and then I often use the word capitalize. Whenever we have a cost and we're deciding whether or not we're going to be considering that cost an asset or we're going to consider that cost an expense. Usually we'll use the term capitalization or capitalize. So are we going to capitalize this cost, whatever the cost is, or are we going to expense it? On the surface, it seems pretty easy. Well, if you buy a building, that's an asset, you're going to capitalize it. If you buy a vehicle, machinery and equipment, those are pretty simple situations and it's pretty easy to make that determination. We have to understand that a capital expenditure increases the asset's capacity or extends its useful life. All right, so we may have situations where if we buy a vehicle, as an example, you have to maintain that vehicle, right? Well, if you have to put gas in it, and has to have some oil changes. Maybe an alternator goes out on it. Those are going to commonly be thought of as repairs. You know, you've got repairs and maintenance and repairs expense, or auto expenses, or vehicle expenses. So pretty straightforward. Okay, well, those costs are going to be expense. They're going to be written off as an expense. They're not going to be capitalized. Okay, they're not going to be capitalized. But there may be circumstances where it may be a little bit more difficult to make that determination. So let's take a look at how that might work. Let's say you have an extraordinary repair. So an extraordinary repair such as a major engine overhaul, or a modification of a body for new use of a truck, or maybe adding some storage capacity of a truck. So those are costs that you might be inclined to think, oh, that's going to be repairs and maintenance, but it's really not. They're extraordinary in nature. You don't have them all the time. It's not like an oil change that you have regularly. It's something that is not very frequent. It does one of two things. It either adds to the underlying value of the asset. In other words, for some reason, when you make this adjustment, now that asset that you're repairing or doing something different to, it adds value to that underlying asset. So if it does that, if the cost does that, or if it extends the useful life of that asset, makes it so that, you know, you thought it was only going to last 5 years, but with this engine overhaul, you'll get at least another 5 years out of it. Well, you've just extended its useful life. So if the cost, that expenditure, whatever you're writing a check out for, if that cost extends the useful life of the asset or adds to the value of the underlying asset, then in both of those cases, you would consider those costs to be a capitalized expenditure, and therefore you're going to capitalize those costs. You're going to add it to the assets. The recording of repair and maintenance expense, it's not an asset. To give you examples of what could qualify under ordinary repairs, repairs of transmission or other mechanisms, oil change, lubrications, and so on, replacement of tires and windshields or paint job. All those would be considered more repairs and maintenance type expenses. They don't meet either one of the two definitions or criteria that I gave you earlier.